It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this. I'm Jeff Grubb, and this is my Game Mess channel. I want to do more of these videos where I kind of talk about what people are talking about in games, especially when they have anxieties and they're not exactly sure about the future of something. I feel like if I have some insights, I'd like to come on here and talk them out and talk through them with people. And I think it's clear what people are having anxieties about this week, and it's the future of PlayStation. And I think a lot of that is really overblown, although I understand where it's coming from. Some of it's coming from some mischaracterizations of stuff that Sony has said to investors. Some of it feels like it's a gut feeling based on kind of the direction the company's headed and what they showed at that PlayStation showcase. And I get all that. I completely sympathize with people who are worried about the future. And there almost certainly is something to those concerns. It's just not as drastic as most people are making it out to be. There are some key issues, and I am going to write that down so I don't forget as it like occurs to me, like, what's a key issue? This is how I make the videos, by the way. Ideas pop in my head. Let's type it down right now. Making sequels is harder than ever. We'll get to that in a little bit. A little teaser for you. So where does this really start, though? This starts from this little chart here, where people are reading this, and a lot of people are reading it correctly, but a lot of the headlines said that by fiscal year 2025, Sony PlayStation is going to begin investing 60% of its video gaming development budget into live service games. So therefore, the other 40% will be, traditional games. It's actually how Sony puts it. Now, that means, on the face of it, Sony will be spending more money on live service games than on traditional games. If you look at the chart a little closer, though, you could kind of see, like, this isn't too much of a real concern because they are, and this bar graph that we're looking at scales this way. That bar graph is growing overall, and you could see that compared to fiscal year 2023, they're going to be spending more money. That light blue is bigger than the year before. Well, then not the year before. That's fiscal 25 versus fiscal 2023. But you can see that it's growing. It's just not growing as fast as the live service bar. If you want to go back to fiscal year 19, you could see that it's about even with the investment there. But they've had a lot of really great games since fiscal year 19. So you can kind of expect the same pace of big single player games from PlayStation just based on this chart alone. Also, boy, it just makes sense that they're going to keep doing that. You kind of know they're going to do that. They know that's what gets people into the door. They're just making these bigger bets that, well, not even bigger bets. They're making a lot of smaller bets, not much smaller, but smaller, that one of these live service games, maybe two if they're lucky, are going to hit, and they're going to hit big. And they're not going to be, a game that makes $1 billion in revenue. They're going to be games that make $10 billion of revenue over the next 10 years. And that is definitely something that they want. But so is this a concern? Is this a problem? Yes and no. The yes is that, well, clearly, if you work at Sony or you want to get acquired by Sony, it does maybe behoove you to bring them a live service game. That's where a lot of the money is going to go if you're coming up with a new idea. Now, I think that works backwards from the reality a little bit, though. And this is the real key point. That number that they're investing in traditional games isn't remaining stagnant because Sony's like, well, we just want to make bets on live service games. If they could, they would spend more money on traditional games. They just don't believe that there is any real opportunity to do so. And what do I mean by that? They are already putting the maximum amount of money that they can into studios like Naughty Dog and Insomniac and Sucker Punch to get great games out of those studios. And you can't just spin up another one of those studios. Those are development teams that have been honed over a long period of time. And, Sony does try to bring some of those other studios up to that level. They're trying that with Housemarque. They previously tried it with Bend. But I think that's evidence of it not working out necessarily, where, we're trying to make Bend the next Naughty Dog or the next Insomniac, and we made a big bet on them with Days Gone, and it didn't pan out. So if they could, they would love to have 10 Last of Us quality caliber games coming out at any one time. That would be great for them. They just don't know. That's $200 million is a lot to put on a game when you're not sure the development team can actually execute on the parameters of that project. So why does that make live service more compelling? Well, listen, live services got problems of its own. There's no guarantees for success. In fact, you're almost guaranteed to fail. But it is more affordable to make a live service game, or at least get one off the ground, or see if it's a good idea, than it is to do that with a big $200 million first-party, single-player, campaign-driven Sony PlayStation game. Those are the most expensive games that there are for the most part, outside of like these long-running like Destiny-style games, or boondoggles like Halo Infinite or something like that. So they're going to make a lot of bets on live service games, and that maybe flips us back to, okay, so they're not making a lot more bets on single player games because the studios just aren't there to do that. And that's where I'm like, I want to stress, like, if they could, they would, but they believe they just can't. And so they are trying to eye the best opportunity for them to do something with the more money that they're making. You could see the money that they're putting into the games is growing. It's, fiscal year 19, it's this little thing, and then you get to be this little big when it's fiscal year 23, and then it's growing massively by fiscal year 2025. They want to be putting more money into games. They just don't think they're going to be able to accomplish any sort of return on investment that's worthwhile to them with traditional games. Now, that is maybe where people are still going to be. There's a cause for concern. You can look at the rest of this chart, this financial report from Sony. We could see, let's see, life to date. These are the things that Sony cares about. And this is the thing that all these companies care about, but Sony's just putting it out there. Life to date spending per console. It's way up on the PS5 versus the PS4. This is what they care about. This is what matters to them. This is because, yeah, sure, you bought a PlayStation for God of War. You bought a PlayStation for Demon's Souls and Ratchet and Clank and whatever else, and the promise of a Ghost of Tsushima sequel, all that. Yeah, you bought all that stuff, but so did all your friends, and your friends are probably hopping into other games as well. Maybe you're not a multiplayer gamer, but your friends are always going on and on playing this multiplayer game or that multiplayer game, this live service game. If your friends are there and they're playing something, boy, that might suck you in, and that network effect is very powerful, and you could see it's already having a huge effect on PS5's life to date spend per console. They're making a lot more money per user than they were before, and that's due to subscriptions. You could see that plus 52%, accessories up 60%, add-on stuff 210% increase. That's microtransactions. It's DLC, but it's microtransactions. That's huge. So they spotted a potential. Sorry, am I getting chimes over here? They spotted a potential like huge growth opportunity. And that's also what's driving this. Yeah, sure. Making these games is hard. I teased like making sequels is hard. And maybe that's where we do flip back to, okay, there's some concern to be had. And why do I say that? Just think about it. They made God of War and they made God of War Ragnarok. And now they're ready to reboot. And I made a video about this before. We have, these two massive, big, expensive games, pretty similar to one another. Nothing wrong with that. I'm playing and loving Tears of the Kingdom right now, and that's the same goddamn map. Nothing wrong with that. But they know that they could get away with that for two games. The third game, likely, possibly, maybe not likely, possibly, they might be seeing a diminishing returns on that investment. And then the fourth game is like, people get kind of sick of it. Some people get sick of it. Reviewers start like docking points because it's the same thing over and over again. This is where a lot of Sony properties are at right now. You saw it at the showcase with Spider-Man 2. That looks great. It's Spider-Man 2. We know we're going to love that. That first game that's the PlayStation 4 game I can go back to and have a great time right now without question. And yet, we saw that showcase and a lot of people are like, yeah, it's Spider-Man. We get it. That's not going to hurt Spider-Man 2. it might start to hurt Spider-Man 3. And this is kind of a Spider-Man 3-ish because of Miles Morales, but no, people are still ready to go for this series. So a lot of Sony properties are sort of in this zone. Now, Ghost of Tsushima, this is why Ghost of Tsushima is so important, because that's proving that they can keep making new things that are going to shoot into that stratosphere of success, and they want more of those. But they might, I mean, man, like these games start going bad as they come in going bad. Now, sorry, interrupted by a kid. None of this is to say that any of the future PlayStation single-player games are going to be bad. They're not going to be. They know how to make them. They're going to deliver them. They're going to be just fine. But they will probably, or again, possibly, see that diminishing returns on investment. And I think Sony knows that, and they're a little bit worried about it. Because how do you reload every single time with something that is equal to or bigger than Spider-Man? That's not going to happen. I think what Sony is like maybe going to try to feel out here is, can they do what Nintendo has done with its franchises, where when it really comes down to time to innovate, time to do something new, they do so and it grows the audience even bigger. I'm sure Sony is eyeballing that and seeing if they could pull it off, but traditionally they've not done this. They have done a handful of games, sometimes a lot of games in a franchise from one studio. And then as that gets sort of played out, like, all right, you're moving on. Going from Resistance to Spider-Man or whatever, going Killzone or whatever they were doing before Killzone. Now they're doing Horizon. And a lot of these studios had games going way back before that as well. I mean, how many PlayStation 1 franchises does Sony still have going around? How many PlayStation 2 franchises does Sony still have actively in production with a new game? I mean, Ratchet and Clank got one. There's a handful. There's some. But for the most part, Sony's strategy is let's get as much as we can out of this, and then the next time around we're going to do something new, and maybe it'll probably be bigger. And usually they've been right about that. It's a completely viable strategy because they've been right. But they are getting to a point where it's like, does it get bigger than Spider-Man? Does it get bigger than God of War? God of War, obviously, they're not going to give up on that. That's going to have a sequel that's going to probably try to reboot things in some ways, maybe expand some things in some key ways. They are on the next-gen systems now. They're the new-gen systems. They could do some new stuff. There's a lot of promise there, but it's really, really hard. This is the key. These sequels are going to happen. New franchises, new IP from these studios that have made a franchise that we've loved before, that's going to happen. But it's all very difficult, a high degree of difficulty, and the return on that investment, while high, there's a ceiling. And so they go back to live service, and we all know this. I'm just saying stuff that everyone fully understands. So really the illuminating stuff I wanted to bring here is kind of it. Yeah, I get why people are concerned. There is something to it, but if you've been happy with the cadence and the output of PlayStation's first-party single-player games so far, I mean, we can go back there. We can go back there right now. Let's scroll there. The bar is as big as it's ever been. You know, it's the same size as it was in fiscal year 19, and it's bigger than it was in fiscal year 23. And if they can get one of these other studios like sort of up to that level of a Sucker Punch or Insomniac, that bar probably does grow a little bit over the years. But for now, they've spotted an easier opportunity to take a lot of that money they have. They make a lot of money, put it on the table, get it working for them. And there's probably it's going to be a little bit of a bloodbath because a lot of these games aren't going to work out. But if one does, if one of them becomes an Apex Legends, which I think is the analogous, that's the analogy. Oh boy. That's the game that most closely resembles, I think, what Sony's going for, as I struggle to say a word. And it's realistic. You could imagine PlayStation making something equivalent to an Apex Legends. Fortnite is like this whole other thing unto itself. It's a platform now. No one else is going to make a Fortnite or a Minecraft even, but you can make an Apex Legends. If you know what you're doing, you got the gameplay down and the characters and the art is all there and the marketing and the budget for the marketing is all in place, all stuff that Sony has on lock. they could make an Apex Legends, and that could be just raking in cash for the next 5-ish years, 10 if they're lucky, if they play their cards right. And they have Bungie, so that's the whole implication there, is that Bungie's going to help them figure out how to play their cards right when they do have one of these that are successful. So I get the motivation here. I think everyone pretty much gets the motivation. If you look at that showcase though, and you're like, they are moving away from me, I don't think so. I think they're trying to put a foot forward and establish that this is another thing that they do. They're not abandoning anything that they've done before, but they're also not expanding the investment. And we've been over that, over why. It's not because they don't want to. It's because of the opportunity cost. And there's a limited number of top tier studios in the world that can make a first party PlayStation game. And they all already are at PlayStation. Maybe they go out and buy CD Projekt Red, I guess. Like, that's the rumor going around right now. I have no idea. But if they do, maybe that's another one. And then they can increase that bar a little bit. They would probably increase that bar a lot, actually. And then that's, that should be sort of a good sign for everybody. Like, they're going to keep doing that. Although I'm sure CD Projekt Red will also have a live service game in the works. All right. Boy, that's just brain vomit, isn't it? But that's how my brain works. That's how I think. And I'm very lucky I have a job where I can spill it all out there, and maybe you'll listen. I'm going to get out of here. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to check out our podcast, Game Mess Decides, on Thursday, Last of the Nintendogs on Tuesdays. And then, of course, I'm over at giantbomb.com, where we do all kinds of fun stuff. Once again, I'm Jeff Grubb. Thanks for watching. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself. And goodbye.